All right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle one of the biggest, most important debates out there. The one that shapes pretty much everything from the news you see to the future we're all heading into. We're talking about international relations. You know, when you boil it all down, the entire study of global politics really comes down to this one huge question. It's a timeless one, really. Are we just doomed to a future of constant conflict? Or is lasting cooperation actually possible? The way you answer that, well, it says a lot about how you view the world. Okay, so to get us started, just take a look at this. This is what's called the cowweb model. The idea here is that the world isn't just a bunch of separate countries. No, it's this incredibly complex, tangled web of connections. You've got governments, big international groups, corporations, even just societies, all linked together. It's messy, it's complicated, and a pull on one string can make the whole thing vibrate. Definitely keep this image in your head.
Because really, this whole debate we're talking about, you can pretty much frame it as a choice between that complex, tangled cobweb and something, well, a whole lot simpler. And maybe a lot harsher.
So on one hand, you've got the billiard ball model. This is that classic kind of hard-nosed view of the world. Think of nations as these solid individual billiard balls on a pool table. They're just looking out for themselves, and they're constantly colliding in this raw struggle for power. But then, on the other hand, you have that cobweb model we just saw. This view argues that, with globalization and everything, those hard shells have kind of become porous. It sees a world that's defined by interdependence, where what happens in one place really does affect everyone else.
Okay, let's start with the optimists in the room, the people who really buy into that cobweb idea. This is the school of thought that really dares to dream that, yeah, a better, more peaceful world is actually possible.
And that school of thought is called liberalism. Now, in international relations, this has nothing to do with domestic politics, okay? It's a totally different thing. It's this fundamental belief that humanity, well, we're not doomed. Liberals argue that if we just use our reason, we can actually build a better world. A world where cooperation can start to replace conflict, and where that state of global anarchy can be managed, even if we can't get rid of it completely.
And this quote, this really captures the spirit of early liberalism, which was often called idealism. I mean, think about it. After the absolute horror of World War I, thinkers like Bertrand Russell genuinely believed that a more just, more peaceful world wasn't just a fantasy, it was something we could actually build.
So the big question is, how do you actually do it? Well, liberals have a pretty specific toolkit they point to. First up, build strong international institutions, like the UN, to give everyone a place to talk things out. Second, you want to create deep economic interdependence. The thinking here is pretty simple. When goods cross borders, soldiers don't. And third, promote democracy. This goes way back to the philosopher Immanuel Kant, who argued that democracies are just fundamentally more peaceful with each other.
And if you want to see this theory in action, look no further than the European Union. It's basically the poster child for liberalism. I mean, you're talking about a continent with a long, brutal history of warfare that transformed itself into what scholars now call a pluralistic security community. Basically, a region where things are so interconnected that a war between, say, France and Germany today is, well, it's just literally unthinkable.
But for every one of those optimists, there's a skeptic standing in the corner looking at that dream and calling it a dangerous fantasy. And that brings us to the other side of the coin, the hard, cold reality of power.
Welcome to realism. This is the billiard ball theory we talked about. For a realist, the world is a dark, dangerous place. There's no global 911 you can call, a situation they call anarchy. So countries are forced into this never-ending competition for power just to make sure they survive. Self-interest is the only thing that matters. And conflict, it's not just possible, it's pretty much inevitable.
This little diagram here really breaks down the cold, hard logic of realism. It's pretty straightforward. You start with the assumption that, at their core, humans are egoistic. We're all about self-interest. Then you combine that with a world that has no higher authority, right? Anarchy. And what do you get? The inevitable result is a world of pure power politics. It's a simple equation, but man, has it been influential.
And this quote gets right to the heart of the classic realist critique. The historian E.H. Carr, writing as the world was sliding into World War II, basically said the problem with the idealists who created the League of Nations was that they got it all backward. They prioritized wishing, how they wanted the world to be, over the truth of how it actually was.
So from that perspective, realists just go down the list and dismantle the entire liberal toolkit. Those big international institutions? Fifth, they're just puppets for the most powerful countries. That economic interdependence? That's great, until a real crisis hits, and then security interests will win out every single time. Realists say that real, lasting cooperation is almost impossible because countries are obsessed with what they call relative gains. It's not just about winning, it's about winning more than the other guy. Because in this dangerous world, your neighbor's gain today could become a threat to your very survival tomorrow.
Okay, so we've got the optimists versus the pessimists, the cobweb versus the billiard balls. But what if they're both asking the wrong questions? What if the real story of our world isn't about peace versus power, but about profit and who's getting exploited?
And that brings us to a totally different perspective, Marxism. This theory just completely reframes the whole debate. It says, look, if you want to understand global politics, you have to understand global capitalism. For Marxists, the main conflicts aren't really between countries like the US and China. Nope, the real battle is between the global capitalist class, the owners, and the global working class. And countries, they're basically just tools to protect the interests of capital. Probably the best way to picture this is with something called the world systems model. It doesn't see a world of equal countries at all. Instead, it sees a global economic hierarchy. You've got this wealthy, industrialized core, think North America, Western Europe, and it's basically extracting cheap labor and raw materials from a poor, dependent periphery, places in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And in doing so, it keeps that periphery in a constant state of underdevelopment.
And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory. Take a look at this number from Oxfam. The G7 nations, that's just 10% of the world's population, they control about 40% of the entire global GDP. Now, for a Marxist, that is not an accident. That's not a coincidence. That is proof right there of how the system is designed to work, to concentrate wealth in the core, and it comes at the expense of the periphery.
But hold on, what if all of these big theories we've talked about, realism, liberalism, even Marxism, what if they all share one gigantic blind spot? What if they are all missing a key ingredient, a fundamental force that shapes absolutely everything?
This is exactly the challenge posed by feminist IR theory. This approach comes along and asks a really simple but totally revolutionary question: where are the women? Feminist scholars argue that all those traditional theories are hopelessly male-stream. I mean, they're written by men, they're about men, and they focus on so-called masculine ideas like power and war, while completely ignoring how gender actually shapes our world and how we even think about it. And when you start looking at the world through this lens, you suddenly see all sorts of things the other theories miss. You start to see how ideas about militarized masculinity, rewarding aggression and being tough, can actually make war more likely. You notice that women and children make up the overwhelming majority of refugees and casualties in modern conflicts, a fact that gets totally lost in all the talk about states and armies. And you start to realize, hey, maybe we need to shift our focus from state security to human security, the security of actual people.
So, where does that leave us? We've got the realist billiard balls, the liberals' cobweb, the Marxist class struggle, and the feminists' focus on gender. After all that, which one is the right one?
Well, here's the most important thing to take away from all this. There is no single correct theory. The best way to think about them isn't as competing answers where one has to win. Instead, think of them as different lenses in a toolkit. The realist lens is fantastic for understanding power politics. The liberal lens helps you see where cooperation is happening. The Marxist lens exposes deep economic inequality. And the feminist lens brings the crucial role of gender into focus. Each one shows you a different, vital piece of the puzzle. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. When you think about the enormous challenges we're all facing right now, pandemics, climate change, huge shifts in global power, the most important question isn't which theory was right about the past. The real question is, which lens, or maybe which combination of lenses, is going to give us the clearest view to navigate the future? And that right there is why this great debate is more alive and more essential than ever.